Hi everyone, good afternoon. I hope everyone had a good lunch session, and right after the lunch I'm talking about taxation to you all. Hopefully none of you all will be put off to sleep. During the day we have heard a lot about the various routes of investments in India. We have talked about the PMS, the AIFs, the GIFT City. What I have tried to do is I've tried to bucket this into each of the routes and how the taxation works, essentially in each of the routes. While I've captured on my slides more on the public market side, but we can even touch upon the other asset classes being unlisted shares, the debentures, etc., as we go along. So essentially, if an NRI is investing into India, if you are coming directly and you're investing in your personal capacity, you would be coming under the portfolio management scheme route. That's like the PMS route, where the investments are held directly in your name. Apart from that, you have the pooling investment vehicle route, where you are investing into a fund and the fund is holding the investments. Now, there are 2 or 3 categories of funds that we have. First one is the category 3 AIF. A cat 3 AIF is basically like a mainland fund. It is set up in India and the non-resident would be investing directly into that fund. Other than that, you have an FPI. FPI is like a foreign portfolio investment fund, which basically you find funds which were set up in Mauritius, UCITS and all. So they are non-Indian funds which raise money from NRIs and they invest from offshore into Indian markets. And the last that we have is the GIFT City. The GIFT City it's a special economic zone which is marked in India. It's something similar to DIFC. And basically, while it is in the Indian market, it is having certain tax benefits and it has a non-resident status from an exchange control perspective. So you can have funds set up out there. Obviously, with the intent to promote GIFT City, you have a lot more tax benefits which are given. And they're trying to make it more akin to investing directly from an offshore jurisdiction. So I'll just take each of them one by one. The first one being the PMS route. So when you look at the PMS route, the first point to note is that, as I said, you are investing directly into the Indian market. The securities are held in your name. The capital gains and all calculation happens in your name. So as such, because you are investing in India, you need to have a permanent account number, a PAN in India. You need to file the tax returns in India. There are certain limits under the regulatory norms up to which you can hold investments, which is 5%, 10%. But essentially, the key aspect out here to note is that the taxation is in your hands. The tax rates would be for short-term capital gains, basically for listed company shares. If you are selling them on market, you have to be holding the securities more than 1 year for long-term and less than 1 year is short-term. The short-term rates it has been increased recently, like in this budget, from 15% to 20%. The effective rate comes to around 24%. The long-term capital gains rate, which was until now 10%, has been increased to 12.5%, and the effective rate comes to around 15%. Dividends, the income is taxable at the rate of approximately 20% plus surcharge cess, which comes to around 24%. Obviously, these rates are under the Act. If you are coming from any treaty jurisdiction, you can get some beneficial tax rates. The beneficial tax rates are most likely not there now for shares. It's there for dividend income. Like in most of the Gulf countries, the rates could vary from 10% to 12.5% odd. So out there, but you need to have a tax residency certificate, etc., and you can claim a lower rate of tax. The key thing out here is that you have a portfolio manager in India which is providing the services. So we need to see how the fee structure is and whether it is subject to GST or not. Most likely, if we can treat this as an export of services, then the GST would not be applicable. The next one is a domestic cat 3 fund. So we heard a lot on this structure over the call where people are talking about a long only fund, a long short fund, absolute fund that we call, which is a derivative fund. So these all are the types of a pooling vehicle. In India, you have basically the concept of an alternative investment funds. We heard that there are 3 categories, category 1, 2, and 3. Category 3 is essentially for public market funds, where they invest into equity shares, listed equity shares, or derivatives, or a mix of them. You can even have NRIs put money in a category 2 fund, which essentially caters to a PE market or a debt market. So they are debt funds or PE funds. Or you can have a category 1 fund, which is more like a venture capital fund or a startup fund. So what I've really captured out here is more on the category 3 fund. So a cat 3 fund, they are not tax pass-through. You have the taxation happening at the fund level, and the investors are given net of tax returns. So out here, essentially the cap gains calculation is not happening in the hands of the investors. It is happening at the fund level, and there are arguments to say that once a fund is distributing that income to you, then it should not be further taxable. You have an ability to have these funds as close-ended or open-ended, so there is complete absolute liquidity available. Most of the Indian public market funds have been now set up as an open-ended fund. You may have just like a year's lock-in or something, and then after that you have an ability to remove funds as per the duration set up by the manager. Out here, the key things again to note is that, as I said, there is no tax pass-through regime, but the way the law has evolved over the time, it's pretty settled that the income will be subject to tax at the fund level. There is, the structure is subject to the complex trust taxation principles, but because of the way the laws have been settled, principally one can say that if you are a pure long-only fund, the capital gains should be taxable at cap gains rate. It should not be subject to tax at the full rates or ordinary rates as we call, which could be as high as 39%. So essentially, your short-term capital gains would be at almost the same rate of 23.9 to 24%, and long-term capital gains would be at the same rate. So the benefit essentially for the investors is that you are not really mapping or doing the computations and all at your level. You are getting net of tax returns. You are yet obliged to file a tax return in India because you are holding investments in India. So whenever you have any exposure or an access to India, there is an obligation for you to file a tax return in India. So apart from that, if the strategy is derivative strategy of the fund, then the income will be subject to tax at the rate of 39%. We even have a mixed bag where we have long short funds where you have some strategies like a 70-30 strategy, 70% going in long only, 30% going in derivatives. Out there, the income of the fund, depending upon part of it, is subject to tax at business income as well as capital gains. Now, when these funds typically distribute the money to the investors, as I said, it should be considered to be an exempt income in the hands of the investors because generally trust is a tax, it's a one-level taxation structure, but there are certain nuances around that. But by and large, the industry view is that even though they are distributing the income, the investors are not again offering it to tax, and they just disclose it as an exempt income that they have received. The key point to note out here that there is a GST applicable at the rate of 18%. So this is a charge which comes on your management fees as well as on your carry portion. The next one is the FPI route. So the FPI route, as I said, is more like a structure which is set up outside India. You have a fund manager, which may be something like in Mauritius, Singapore, Luxembourg. Most of these jurisdictions are typically used for pooling money, and there are regulatory norms around this structure. The pooling vehicle needs to be registered with SEBI as a foreign portfolio investor. You have categories out there. But the key point to note out here is that the NRI investment in this vehicle cannot exceed on an overall basis more than 50%. And an individual cannot hold more than 25%. So this becomes a little gating issue in the structure when they want to raise money substantially from NRIs. From a taxation point of view, this structure is much more cleaner, because it has got a clear capital gains treatment, and the income is subject to tax at the same rates as I mentioned. Slightly better because these structures, when they're set up as corporates, foreign companies, the surcharge rate applicable to them is 5%, as against for individuals, which is 15%. Delta is not too large, but a minuscule difference is there. Again, because this is a foreign company, you can claim treaty benefits if they are available. So if you're coming from Mauritius, for instance, and subject to you having the substance car and all provisions and language you would have heard, so the rates would have been 7.5% on dividend as against to 22%, which could have been applicable under the Act. So there are benefits on the dividend income side. Derivative income, very interestingly, derivatives, if you are coming from a treaty jurisdiction, it can become zero tax. But because of the general anti-avoidance rules, the MLI provisions that you need to show substance in the home country, and you have to have a rationale that why you're coming from a particular jurisdiction, this becomes a kind of a litigative issue out here. So distribution to the investors are exempt. So unlike in the way I had explained to you all, if you all have a mainland fund, when the income is distributed, there is a call taken that yes, it's an exempt income because trusts are subject to one-level taxation. But in an FPI structure, it is pretty clean that any distribution done by the FPI to its investors should not be further subject to tax in India. Also, there is no obligation on the investors to file a tax return in India. They don't need to take a PAN in India. So people who are not having any other investments as such in India, if they're coming through these structures, they are just earning income from India without having any compliances to be done in India. And this structure is not subject to any GST, so GST of 18% is also a tax saving, which is there in the structure. The next one is on the gift fund side. So basically, we heard a lot about the gift city structures and how they are, they are upcoming in the market right now. Gift city is essentially the idea of onshoring the offshore. So what we have as an FPI structure, the intent is that that becomes like a gift city structure. So where you are setting up funds in Mauritius, Singapore and all, the intent is those funds now should be set up in gift city. The tax regime is being brought as close as possible or to some extent better than what you have when you're investing from a foreign country. The key benefit is that the concessional tax regime is all prescribed under the Act itself. So your dependency on the treaty and all is completely gone away. And obviously, the fund manager needs to have substance in gift city. He needs to set up a fund manager out there. He needs to have people and infrastructure out there. But from an investor's perspective, this structure is almost akin to you investing from a foreign jurisdiction. So just going line by line, another key benefit of the structure is the NRI contribution. Out here, they have removed the cap of 50%. So you can have a fund set up 100% for NRIs. So this becomes the biggest benefit of the structure right now. The contribution by a single NRI investor yet continues to be limited to 25%. The minimum investment contribution required is USD 1,50,000. And there are no restrictions on derivative investments. So unlike in the PMS route, there are certain restrictions when you're coming directly to invest through derivatives, but in this structure, it is not there. The benefit that this offers is that the derivative income becomes zero tax in gift city, and there is no dependency on any treaty benefit. From a capital gains tax rate perspective, the structure has the same tax rates, the short-term capital gains, long-term. So income is not exempt on an overall basis. It is yet subject to tax, but there is more tax certainty, which is there. The dividend income has a concessional rate of 10% flat, which could be higher in some other jurisdictions. Like, I think in India, UAE tax treaty, it's 12.5%. Out here, it is 10%. And as I said, no dependency on treaty at all. Plus, there is no need to file any tax returns in India. Sorry, you have a question? Yes, I'll come to that. That's on the manager side. Yep. So the relaxation is there for the investors out here, that you don't need to take a PAN or file any tax return in India. So this is like, again, as I said, they wanted to completely mirror that if you are coming from a foreign jurisdiction, if you are coming through gift city also, they don't want to put any obligation on you to file a tax return or take a PAN, provided you don't have any other source of income in India. And there is no GST. Because this is a special economic zone, it is considered as export of services, so there is no GST which is applicable out here. The point that you're making on the manager, the 10-year holiday, that's a 10-year holiday benefit which is given to the fund manager. So if you have any business income out there, there is a 10-year tax holiday in a block of 15 years. So that is another added advantage for the entire structure. The gift, so while I have touched upon the listed equity side, you can also have, so we have structures out there which can be used to act. Sorry. I can complete, I have one more slide. Yeah. So this is the next slide, which is on the gift city for mutual funds. So this is a very interesting product where basically you can raise money for investing in mutual funds, and the key benefit of this structure is that when you redeem units of a mutual fund, the income is exempt from tax in the gift city fund. So this is, see, even today, if an NRI is investing in units of a mutual fund and it's a growth scheme, it is yet exempt from tax. But again, you are subject to the requirements of filing a tax return in India, claiming treaty benefits, submitting a TRC, etc. So this structure gives you a lot of advantage because this is, again, as I said, coded under the Act itself. So also the ticket size, while I have mentioned USD 1,50,000, that is for a restricted scheme. If the fund manager is set up as a retail fund manager and the scheme is a retail scheme, then the ticket size is also not applicable. So it becomes a very lucrative product to raise money for investing in mutual funds in India. And again, the same benefits, no GST. While I have touched upon all the products which are linked to a public market side, there are also a lot of products which are there on the equity side. So you could have a structure where you are raising a feeder fund in GIFT City to invest in the domestic Cat 2 fund. And that essentially from a tax perspective is a pure pass-through structure. So today you have a lot of feeder funds being set up in Mauritius or in Singapore or in Luxembourg, etc., because most of the non-resident investors don't want to directly invest in India. So those feeder funds in a PE fund structure can also be replaced and put in GIFT City. And in those structures, you have a pure tax pass-through regime, so nothing changes for the investors. In fact, they don't even need to file a tax return or take a PAN if you don't have any income in India. Open to take some questions. Yep. Yeah. Sorry? Yes.
I thought I had energy after food. Hi. So the slide 4 and slide 5. So we understand if a NRI puts the money into a mutual fund, right? Of course, there is no tax for him, but also because the fund is investing in domestic fund, there is no tax even for that fund as well.
Yeah. Mutual funds are exempt from tax.
Okay.
As such, the mutual fund regime only provides that an Indian domestic mutual fund is exempt, investors are taxable. But because of the investor's own tax regime, the investor is also becoming exempt. And on upstreaming the money, it's further exempt.
Got it.
So it's actually a full tax pass-through structure.
Okay, thanks. And another question, just clarification. I think you put everywhere NRI, but I assume this is also applicable for people who have no background with India.
I'm sorry, your voice is...
Non-Indian people. Is it also applicable for non-Indian people?
Yeah, it's applicable for anyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, appreciate the presentation. Thank you. It was really insightful. Just a clarification I needed. So if a person investing in any of the GIFT City funds or when
Sorry, your voice is a little muffled.
Sorry. If someone redeems the GIFT City funds,
yes,
it's a pass-through. There's no tax. But the person is filing tax returns in India on other income. He may have house property, etc. Does he have to report this income as exempt income in the tax returns?
Yes, because this fund is a Cat 3 fund. It's an exempt income. So this is a Section 10 income. So you have to report it in the exempt schedule.
Okay. And what happens if he doesn't report it? Is there anything that goes wrong?
It's in a scrutiny matter. It will come up. You'll just have to report it at that point in time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Just
okay, sure.
taking further from this question itself.
Sorry, you have a question?
Yeah, just
please.
last point. Yeah. From the same question, as you clarified, the next point is, in case scenario, can this tax again put after 10 years retrospectively?
Sorry.
The government may come up the tax on retrospectively later stage?
No.
On such incomes?
See, logically, the way we have seen the government operating, they are not coming out with any retrospective amendments. The entire idea is to promote GIFT City. How can they come out with a regime to say that the income which was supposed to be exempt income and now they are saying that it has to be offered to tax? I don't anticipate that.
Okay, it seals. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Neha. That was a wonderful. Thank you, Neha, for that wonderful presentation.